Hi, welcome to Song Online. Dave here, and today I'm going to give you some bow hand tips. So, when I say bow hand, what do I mean? I mean the hand that holds the bow. So, this is our bow, right? When you have a violin or viola or cello, this is what we use to make the sound, usually. Sometimes you can pluck the strings with your fingers. But usually, we've got this thing called a bow, and we're drawing the sound out of the violin. So, a couple principles to keep in mind. First of all, the bow has this little thing on the bottom, right? This is called the frog, and this is the screw that actually tightens the bow. So when you bring your bow out of the case, you might notice that the hair is kind of like a little bit loose, right? Just kind of dangling. Now when you turn that screw to the right, clockwise, it tightens the bow. And what we're looking for is basically enough for like a pinky finger to basically fit, because you want the bow to still have this little curve in the stick. That's actually why they call it a bow. Bow, like a bow and arrow, means a curve. So we've got this curved stick with hair on it, and we make sure we rosin it so that it's nice and sticky. You guys might have rosin in your cases. Rosin it up, and then when it's nice and sticky, you can make sound on it. So one thing to keep in mind is that we're sort of given this space here, this highway, where we have the bridge and the fingerboard, and then we've got this space in between. This is kind of our roadway for the bow. That's where the bow travels to make the best sound. We place it on the string, and away it goes. You just kind of keep that hair magnetized to the string, and you guide it along. You just kind of guide it. Now, one thing that I always like to say is that you should always think of the bow more as a vehicle than a tool. What do I mean by that? So instead of, gripping the bow and using it like a screwdriver or a hammer or a sword, you gotta think of it as like a really big finger skateboard or a surfboard or something that your hand is actually going for a ride on. You place it on the string, and your hand is just kind of going along for the ride. Now, a few other things to keep in mind is, how do you hold the bow? Where do you hold the bow? So, like I said, this bottom part is called the frog, and this is kind of your guide for where to hold it. You put your thumb on like the sort of little bit above that little pokey part, where it kind of comes out like a U. That you can kind of rest your thumb on that, and on all your fingers sit on top of the bow. The pinky especially goes on top of the stick, and then your other fingers, it's all in the fingertips, and they just kind of grab it almost like you're grabbing a pencil. And then, so you can actually feel that the pinky is actually holding quite a lot of weight. When the bow is flat like this, you can feel all the weight of the bow pushing up against the pinky, and so the pinky has got to be nice and strong. So this technique right here, this is what I call pinky push-ups, because you're taking your pinky and you're working it out. You're practicing, how do you transfer that weight up and down using mostly the pinky, and then all the other fingers are just stabilizing. So another thing is, when you do it upright, I like to call these window washers. See if you can move the bow, but really all you're doing is just allowing it up with your pinky and then pushing it. And it's gonna be hard at first because, the pinky is a tiny finger, it's our little piggy, and you gotta practice it, you gotta work on it, and you gotta practice your window washers. The good thing about this is you can do this around the house. When you're watching TV, watching movies, you can kind of just hold your bow and just get used to it. Get used to the weight of the bow, and get used to how it feels in your hand. Get used to holding it in your fingertips. The more familiar you are with your bow, the easier it is going to be to use on the instrument. Now, if you do want to practice on the violin, it's just as easy as playing your open string, so you don't need any left hand fingers. You can start maybe on your lowest string, your G string, at the tip of the bow, and just try to keep it really straight. You want to go parallel to the bridge. So we go, and you guide the bow along all the way to the frog, and then once you get there, see if you can just turn around, go the other way, and all the while keeping it really straight. You want the hair to be flat, and one thing you might notice is that as you're bowing the strings, when we get close to the frog, your elbow is kind of, you know, it's inward, everything's kind of squished in a bit, and then as you get towards the tip of the bow, you're gonna see your arm is opening up like a wing. You're kind of opening that arm, and that's the engine that drives the bow, comes from the elbow, the opening and closing of the elbow, and being able to have your wrist accommodate. Everything is all about being loose, but, you know, accommodating. You can practice the same things on all the other strings because it's always the same mechanism, but maybe just a slightly different angle. We've got, you know, our G string angle, you gotta raise that elbow up, and then when you go to the D string, we come down a little bit because we gotta watch the angle of the bow, make sure you're just on the D string, make sure that hair is touching the string before you start, and you draw the bow. And then A string, string, change the angle again. So all of these things together produce, you know, our sound on the violin, and you know, it's something that we always kind of work on. Like a singer is always working on their sound, violinist and cellist, violist, always working on that sound, making a really beautiful sound with the bow. Now, so we know that we've got these 4 different levels of strings, right? And so you can practice, you know, your long bows. Then you can practice string crossings too. So one thing that we're always having to do on the violin is go from one string to another. And so you have to get used to what exactly is that angle that you're changing between strings. For example, G string and D string go back and forth. Play G, and then D, and then G, and then D, then G, and then D. And each time you do it, take note of that exact change of angle. Watch your bow like a hawk, and then make sure that you can feel the hair transfer from one string to another. Same thing with the D and the A string. And then the A and the E string. So, one thing that maybe you can do to make a little game of it is if you took little scraps of paper and just write a letter on that piece of paper and crumple it up, put it in a cup, and then you can pull out a couple of pieces of paper, and then those are the 2 strings that you have to go back and forth. So let's say, you know, you have 4 pieces of paper, one says G, one says D, one says A, one says E. You pull out a piece of paper and then a next piece of paper. Let's say you got a G and then an A. Then you got to change between your G string and your A string, so you have to jump over the D string. So you can kind of make a little game like that for yourself and practice your string crossings. It makes it a little bit more fun. You can do it with your parent or brother, sister. And yeah, so another thing that we should practice, so we know long bows, that's, you know, when you're going all the way up and down the bow. Then there are short bows too, because in music there's lots of different sounds you can make, so you can practice short bows. Right at the tip, or right at the frog, right at the bottom of the bow. Try changing a little bit faster, and you don't go all the way up the bow, you just stay right there and you just keep it going. Try to go really fast, maybe right at the tip, as fast as you can. Or maybe try a long bow and then a short bow. So all of these different things, you can go back and forth and just play around with it. The bow, you know, a popular metaphor for the bow is the painter's paintbrush. You know, you can make all sorts of different colors, that your fingers are kind of your color palette, what notes you're gonna play, what strings you're gonna play, and then it's, you know, how much of each one that you're gonna use with the bow, how thick and big the sound, or thin and small and fast. And so you be the boss and work on your bow hand, and remember all these different things that go into it, and be mindful as you practice. Okay? Good luck, have fun. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and click that bell to turn the notifications on.